Henry McCarty, later known as Billy the Kid, was born on November 23, 1859. His birth marked the beginning of a life that would become legendary, filled with both hardship and infamy. His birthplace is generally believed to be New York City, although the exact location remains uncertain. New York City in the mid-1800s was a bustling metropolis, teeming with immigrants and rife with opportunities and challenges alike. Little is known about his parents, Catherine and Patrick McCarty. They were Irish immigrants, part of the wave of people who came to America seeking a better life. Their story, like many others, was one of struggle and resilience. Life for young Henry was challenging from the start. Growing up in a poor immigrant family meant that he was no stranger to hardship. The streets of New York were tough, and survival often required more than just hard work. His family faced poverty and hardship, forcing them to relocate frequently in search of better prospects. Each move was a gamble, a hope that the next place would offer the stability and opportunity they desperately needed. Tragedy struck early in Henry's life. The death of his father, Patrick, left a void that would never be filled. It was a loss that would shape Henry's future in profound ways. His father passed away, leaving Catherine to raise her sons alone. As a single mother in the 19th century, Catherine faced immense challenges. She had to be both mother and father, provider and protector. She moved the family to Indianapolis, hoping for a fresh start. The move was a testament to her determination to provide a better life for her children, despite the odds stacked against her. However, their financial struggles persisted. The promise of a new beginning in Indianapolis quickly faded as they continued to face the harsh realities of poverty. Catherine McCarty battled tuberculosis, a disease with limited treatment options at the time. Her illness added another layer of difficulty to their already precarious situation. She sought solace and a chance at recovery in the drier climates of the American West. The journey west was arduous, but it was driven by a desperate hope for a better future. The McCarty family journeyed west, eventually settling in Santa Fe, New Mexico. The move to Santa Fe was a significant change, offering new opportunities and challenges in equal measure. Catherine's health briefly improved, offering a glimmer of hope. For a short time it seemed as though their fortunes might finally be turning. She met and married William Antrim, a saloon owner and prospector. This marriage brought a semblance of stability to the family, and for a while it seemed as though they might find some measure of peace. Despite their best efforts, tragedy struck again. Catherine's health began to decline once more, and the specter of tuberculosis loomed large over the family. Catherine succumbed to tuberculosis in 1874. Her death was a devastating blow to Henry, who was just 14 years old at the time. Henry, just 14 years old, was orphaned and left to navigate the world on his own. The loss of his mother marked a turning point in his life, thrusting him into a world of uncertainty and danger. The loss of his mother marked a turning point in Henry's life. With no family to turn to, he was forced to fend for himself, a daunting task for someone so young. He found himself alone, adrift, and increasingly drawn to the fringes of society. The streets became his home, and he quickly learned the harsh lessons of survival. The seeds of rebellion and discontent, sown by a life of hardship and loss, began to take root. Henry's experiences hardened him, setting him on a path that would lead to his infamous future. The young man who would become known as Billy the Kid was about to embark on a path that would forever etch his name in the annals of the American West. His early years, marked by loss and struggle, were the crucible that forged the legend of Billy the Kid. The death of his mother left Henry unmoored. It was a devastating blow for a young boy who had already faced numerous hardships. The loss of his mother, who had been his anchor and source of stability, left him adrift in a world that seemed increasingly harsh and unforgiving. He drifted from town to town, taking odd jobs to survive. Each new place offered a fleeting sense of hope, but it was never long before he had to move on again. The transient lifestyle was tough, but it was all he knew. He learned to adapt quickly, picking up skills that would later serve him well in his more notorious endeavors. He worked as a hotel busboy, a ranch hand, and even took on the most menial of tasks just to get by. These jobs were grueling and often thankless, but they taught him the value of hard work and perseverance. He became adept at blending into his surroundings, a skill that would prove invaluable in his later life, and even dabbled in gambling. The saloons and gambling dens of the West were rough places, but they offered a chance to make quick money. Henry, with his sharp mind and quick reflexes, found that he had a knack for the game. It was here that he began to develop the persona that would later become infamous. It was during this period that he began using the alias Kid Antrim, possibly to avoid being associated with his stepfather. The name gave him a sense of anonymity and freedom, allowing him to reinvent himself. It was a small but significant step towards the outlaw identity he would fully embrace in the years to come. The American West was a land of opportunity and lawlessness. It was a place where the rules were often made on the fly, and survival depended on one's ability to navigate a world that was both brutal and beautiful. For many, it was a land of dreams and possibilities, but for others, it was a harsh and unforgiving landscape. Survival often depended on one's wits and willingness to bend the rules. The line between right and wrong was often blurred, and those who could think on their feet and adapt quickly were the ones who thrived. Henry, with his quick mind and willingness to take risks, found that he could navigate this world with a certain ease. For a young man like Henry, already hardened by hardship, the lure of easy money and excitement proved difficult to resist. The promise of adventure and the thrill of living on the edge were intoxicating. He was drawn to the excitement of the outlaw life, where every day was a new challenge and every moment was filled with possibility. Henry's first brush with the law came in 1875. It was a turning point in his life, marking the beginning of his descent into a life of crime. The arrest was a wake-up call, but instead of deterring him, it only seemed to solidify his resolve to live life on his own terms. He was arrested for stealing clothes and firearms in Camp Grant, Arizona. The theft was a desperate act, born out of necessity and a desire to survive. But it also marked the beginning of his reputation as a cunning and resourceful outlaw. The authorities saw him as a troublemaker, but to others, he was a symbol of defiance and rebellion. He managed to escape custody, marking the start of his life as a fugitive. The escape was daring and audacious, showcasing his ability to think on his feet and take bold risks. It was a defining moment, one that would set the tone for the rest of his life. From that point on, he was always on the run, always looking over his shoulder. This incident solidified his reputation as a skilled horseman and a daring escape artist, traits that would serve him well in the years to come. His ability to evade capture and outsmart his pursuers became legendary. He was no longer just Henry, he was becoming Billy the Kid, a name that would strike fear and admiration in equal measure. As Henry's notoriety grew, so did his legend. Stories of his exploits spread far and wide, each tale more sensational than the last. He became a figure of myth and folklore, a symbol of the wild and untamed spirit of the American West. His name was whispered in saloons and around campfires, each retelling adding to his mystique. He was said to be quick on the draw, a skilled gambler, and a master of deception. His ability to read people and situations made him a formidable opponent. Whether at the poker table or in a gunfight, he always seemed to have the upper hand. His reputation as a quick-draw artist was well-earned, and many who faced him lived to regret it. And charming despite his rough edges. He had a charisma that drew people to him, a magnetic presence that was hard to ignore. Even those who knew of his criminal activities couldn't help but be captivated by his charm and wit. He was a complex figure, both feared and admired, a man who lived by his own rules. He was often described as small in stature but possessing a quiet confidence that commanded attention. His size belied his strength and determination. He had an air of authority that made people take notice, a presence that was impossible to ignore. Despite his youth, he carried himself with the confidence of someone who had seen and done much. He began using the name William H. Bonney, further distancing himself from his past and embracing the persona of an outlaw. The new name was more than just an alias. It was a declaration of his new identity. He was no longer the lost and drifting Henry, he was Billy the Kid, a name that would go down in history as one of the most infamous outlaws of the American West. The American Southwest in the late 19th century was a tumultuous place. Tensions ran high between cattle ranchers and sheep herders, often erupting into violence. The Lincoln County War, a bloody feud between rival factions vying for control of the region's lucrative trade routes and resources, became a defining chapter in Billy the Kid's life. In 1877, Billy aligned himself with John Tunstall, an English rancher and businessman who represented one side of the Lincoln County conflict. Tunstall became a father figure to Billy, offering him stability and purpose. However, their partnership was short-lived. Tunstall was murdered by rivals, an act that enraged Billy and ignited a cycle of revenge killings. Billy and his associates, known as the Regulators, sought justice for Tunstall's death, engaging in shootouts and raids against their enemies. the Lincoln County War escalated, drawing in lawmen, politicians, and opportunistic gunmen, turning the region into a battleground. Section 4, the Lincoln County War, a Crucible of Violence. This conflict, which erupted in the late 1870s, was a defining moment in the history of the American West. It was a time when lawlessness and personal vendettas ruled the day, and the lines between right and wrong were often blurred. The Lincoln County War was a complex and brutal conflict. It was a power struggle between rival factions vying for economic control in the New Mexico territory. The war pitted the established Murphy-Dolan faction against the upstart Tunstall-McSween faction, leading to a series of violent confrontations. Billy the Kid, still a teenager, was thrust into the heart of the bloodshed. He was drawn to the Tunstall-McSween side, seeking justice for the murder of his employer, John Tunstall. This personal vendetta would fuel his actions throughout the conflict. He participated in several gunfights, including the Battle of Lincoln, a 5-day siege that left several men dead. This battle was one of the most significant and bloody confrontations of the war, showcasing the intense and often chaotic nature of the conflict. His reputation as a deadly gunman grew with each encounter. Stories of his exploits spread quickly, painting him as both a hero and a villain, depending on who was telling the tale. His skill with a gun and his fearless nature made him a formidable figure in the war. Billy's involvement in the war went beyond mere gunplay. He became a key player in the Tunstall-McSween faction, participating in strategic planning and executing daring raids. His leadership and bravery earned him the respect of his peers and the fear of his enemies. He was known for his daring escapes, his ability to elude passes, and his cunning strategies. On multiple occasions, he managed to slip through the fingers of lawmen, further enhancing his legendary status. His escapes were not just acts of desperation but calculated moves that showcased his intelligence and resourcefulness. He became a symbol of resistance against corruption and injustice, at least in the eyes of some. Many locals saw him as a Robin Hood-like figure standing up against the oppressive forces that sought to control their lives. His actions, though violent, were seen as a necessary evil in the fight for justice. However, his actions also demonstrated a disregard for the law and a willingness to resort to violence. His criminal activities, including theft and murder, painted a darker picture of the young outlaw. To many, he was nothing more than a dangerous criminal who needed to be stopped. The Lincoln County War eventually ended in a truce, but not before claiming the lives of dozens of men, including many innocent bystanders. The aftermath of the war left Lincoln County scarred and its residents weary. The truce brought a fragile peace, but the memories of the violence lingered. Billy the Kid, once a young man seeking a fresh start, was now a wanted outlaw with a price on his head. The war had transformed him from a hopeful youth into a hardened fugitive, constantly on the run from the law. His life became a series of narrow escapes and relentless pursuits. The war had shaped him, hardening his resolve and cementing his destiny as a figure of both fascination and fear. His legacy would live on, immortalized in stories, songs, and films, as a symbol of the tumultuous and often violent history of the American West. Section 5. A growing reputation, Billy the Kid on the run. Following the Lincoln County War, Billy the Kid became a fugitive. He drifted throughout New Mexico, constantly on the move to evade capture. He continued to associate with outlaws and cattle rustlers, engaging in robberies and other criminal activities to survive. Despite his life on the run, Billy remained a charismatic figure. He was known for his generosity, often sharing his ill-gotten gains with those in need. He was said to be a skilled gambler and a charming companion, capable of disarming even his staunchest critics. Stories of his exploits spread throughout the West, blurring the lines between fact and fiction. Billy's reputation as a cold-blooded killer was countered by tales of his loyalty, his quick wit, and his undeniable charm. He became a folk hero to some, a symbol of the Wild West's spirit of rebellion and defiance. However, for others, he remained a dangerous criminal, a reminder of the lawlessness that plagued the frontier.